Hello everyone, this is Jana Gajjar, Assistant Professor at ITICT Department of LG Institute of Engineering and Technology. Welcome to the 12th lecture of Unit 3. In previous lecture, we have discussed about the risk analysis and management, in which we have discussed about what is risk, what is software risk, what are the categories of risk, what are known and predictable risk, what are reactive and proactive risk strategy, and about risk identification. Now in today's lecture, we will learn about risk projection, risk refinement and risk mitigation. So let's start with the first topic, that is risk projection. Risk projection attempts to rate each risk in a two-way. Okay, so by two-way you can attempt to rate any of the risk. The first way is the probability that the risk is real. Okay, so what is the probability of the particular risk is real or not? And the second way is the consequences of problem associated with the risk should it occur. Okay, so what are some consequences and what is the probability of this? These are some two ways for risk projection. Here the project planner, managers and technical staff perform 4 risk projection step. Okay, so the intent of this step is to consider risk in a manner that leads to the prioritization. Okay, so here project team will give you some step for projection of risk. Okay, and this step is to be considered risk in a manner that leads to the prioritization. Okay, so if all the team member will define a number of risk, then you have to define what is the probability and what is the priority of the particular risk. And by the prioritizing risk, the software team can allocate limited resources where they have the most impact. Okay, so if you already know about that this risk will happen. Okay, so you will allocate the minimum amount of resources to the particular activity. Okay, so here what are the 4 steps of risk projection? The first step is establish a scale that reflects the perceived likelihood of a risk. Okay, so that means you have to give number 1 to 10 to the particular risk. If you will give 1 rank, then it is a low risk, and if you give 10 numbers, then it is a high risk. Okay, so this is the scale. So you have to establish a scale. Then you have to delineate the consequences of the risk. Means you have to define what are the consequences for the particular risk. Then you have to estimate the impact of risk on the project and product. Okay, so what is the impact? Means low impact or high impact. Okay, so you have to estimate the impact of the risk for the particular product. And here you have to note the overall accuracy of the risk projection so that there will be no misunderstanding. Okay, so if one team member will give you some risk and the same risk is given by the another team member, so here conflict occur and it also leads to the increase of the cost. Okay, so these are 4 steps that you have to follow for risk projection. First you have to establish a scale from 1 to 10. Okay, so impact level. Then you have to define consequences of risk. Then you have to estimate the impact of the risk and overall accuracy of the risk projection to avoid the misunderstanding. Okay, so these are the estimation steps. Now understand about the content of risk table. Okay, now you already have a risk, but you have to put that risk into a particular risk table. Okay, so what is the content of that risk table? So risk table provide a project manager with a simple technique for risk projection. Okay, so if you have to estimate the risk, then it is the best way to estimate. Okay, so if there is a risk identification in your product, then you have to put all the risk into the risk table. Okay, so risk table will help the project manager to calculate the risk estimate. Okay, so it consists of basically 5 columns: risk summary, risk category, probability, impact level and R triple. Okay, so risk summary means you have to define a short description of the particular risk. Then risk category means we have already discussed about known and predictable risk category, that 7 category in previous lecture. So risk categories. Then you have to define a probability, means estimation of risk occurrence based on the group input. Okay, so if you are giving some input and based on the given input, what is the probability of particular risk, that you have to define in a probability column. Then impact 1 to 4 means you have to define the impact level of the particular risk. Okay, so whether the risk is catastrophic, critical, marginal, or negligible. Okay, so you have to define any of the impact. And last is a RMMM, that is pointer to a paragraph in the risk mitigation, monitoring and management plan. So if you have any risk, then how you mitigate that risk, how you monitor that particular risk, and what is the management plan for the particular risk. Okay, so risk table contain all these particular columns. Okay, so risk summary, category, probability, impact and RMMM. Okay, so this is about the content of a risk table. Now let's discuss how to develop a risk table. Okay, we already have a structure of a risk table. Now to develop a risk table, you have to list all the risk in the first column. Okay, so in first column risk summary, so you have to identify all the risk, okay, by way of the help of the risk item checklist. Okay, so in risk identification we have learned about the risk checklist. Okay, so if you found or if you identify any risk in your project, then you have to put that into a risk checklist. Okay, so you have to fill first column by using the risk checklist. Okay, risk item checklist. Then second step is mark the category of each risk. Okay, so if you found any risk, then define the category, whether it is a product risk or budget risk or any product size. Okay, and so on. So you have to mark the category of each risk. Then you have to estimate the probability of each risk occurring. Okay, so you have to define a probability, like how much time this risk will occur. Okay, so probability of particular risk once occurring, and then you have to access the impact of each risk based on the averaging of the 4 risk component to determine overall impact value. Okay, so here we have defined some impact value. So you have to access the impact of each risk based on the averaging of the 4 risk component. Then you have to sort the rows by probability and impact in the descending order. Okay, so if you are arranging in a descending order, then you can able to analyze what is the highest priority risk. Okay, so what is the probability of particular risk and what is the impact. Okay, so highest probability and highest impact of risk is on the topmost. Okay, so you are able to recognize what is the highest probability risk, and then you have to draw a horizontal cutoff line in the table that indicate the risk that will be given further attention. Okay, so you have to mark something. Okay, so based on this mark you can able to identify in future that this risk may occur. Okay, and you have to give a particular attention to the particular risk. It is same as if you are marking something on your textbook. Okay, so if it is an important topic, then you will mark it like, okay, so star or something. Okay, so similarly you have to draw a horizontal cutoff line. Okay, so to identify that this particular risk will given a further attention. Okay, so this is the way you can develop a particular risk table. Now how you access the risk impact. Okay, so there are 3 factors affect the consequences that are likely if a risk does occur, that is its nature, its scope and its timing. So its nature means this indicates the problem that are likely if the risk occur. Okay, so if any risk occur, then this will indicate its nature. Then scope, this combines the severity of risk. Okay, so how serious that particular risk is and with its overall distribution. Okay, so how much it affected the whole project. Okay, that is the scope. And next is its timing, means this consider when and for how long the impact will be felt. Okay, so if you found any risk, then what is the time impact of the particular risk in your software development. Okay, so if any project manager leave the company, then you have to find project manager, and then after that project manager will guide you for the further activities or further development. Okay, so that might be a risk. So it's timing. So these are three factors that affect the consequences of the risk. Okay, so the overall risk exposure formula is RE, that is risk exposure equal to P into C. P stands for probability of occurrence of risk, and C is the cost to the project should the risk actually occur. Okay, so what will be the cost of the particular risk? So if you calculate the probability and cost, you are able to identify the risk exposure. Okay, so for an example, like if you have a probability of 80%, okay, so 80% probability that 18 of 16 software component have to be developed. Okay, component will have to be developed. Okay, so here total cost for 18 component is given like $25,000. Okay, so if you have to develop 18 component and each cost you $25,000, okay, and probability is 80%. Okay, so now you have to calculate the risk exposure by probability, that is given 80% means 0.80 multiply by cost, that is 25,000. So a $20,000, that is your risk exposure. So this is for the risk projection, means risk estimation. Now let's discuss about risk refinement. Okay, so you have already identified the risk. You have also estimate the risk cost. Okay, now you have to refine the particular risk. So during early stages of project planning, a risk may be stated quite general. Okay, so as time passes and more is learned about the risk, it may possible to refine the risk into a set of more detailed risks, each somewhere easy to monitor and manage. Okay, so if customer give you some requirement, then based on the requirement you are analyzing what are the feasible requirement. Okay, and you will finalize the customer requirement. Now you can also define the risk, okay, in a general way, like if there is a design issue, then you will do this particular thing. Okay, but now you have already defined a general risk. Now as the time goes on, okay, so if your software is under development, then you are now able to identify more about the particular risk. Okay, so as the time passes, more is learned about the risk. Okay, so it may be possible to refine the risk into a set of more detailed risks, each somewhere easy to monitor and manage. Okay, so if you are detailing something, then you can easily able to monitor and manage the particular risk. Okay, so one way to do this is to represent the risk in CTC, that is condition transition consequences format. Okay, so CTC is one of the format for risk refinement. Okay, so what is the format? Format is like, given that you have to define condition, then there is a concern, that is possibly, and then after consequences. Okay, so here condition, transition and the consequences. Okay, so refinement help to isolate the underlying risk and lead to the easier analysis and response. Okay, for an example, only 70% of software components are reusable and the remaining 30 needs to be custom built. Okay, so this is your case. Now you have to represent this in a CTC format. Okay, so sub conditions are like, first is certain reusable component were developed by a third party with no knowledge of internal design standard, and second is certain reusable component have been implemented in the language that is not supported on the target environment. Okay, so here 70% of software components are reusable and the remaining 30% are custom built. Okay, so based on this case, you can define two sub conditions like certain reusable component were developed by any third party. Okay, so if you are giving your software product development to the third person, okay, but that particular third person have no knowledge of internal design standards, so he or she can develop anything, okay, based on your given requirement. And second sub condition are like, some reusable component have been implemented in a language that is not supported on the target environment. Means you are developing your software in a Python language, but on customer side there is a Visual Studio, okay, and he or she need a project in a website format with a C# language. Okay, so there is a compatible issue. Okay, so this is about the risk refinement. So let's understand about RMMM. Okay, so RMMM stand for risk mitigation, monitoring and management. Okay, so an effective strategy for dealing with risk must consider three issues. Okay, risk mitigation, risk monitoring, risk management and contingency planning. Risk mitigation means avoidance. Okay, so you are avoiding the risk. Okay, so note that these are not mutually exclusive. Okay, these all three issues are different. Okay, so risk mitigation means risk mitigation is a problem avoidance activity. Okay, so if you are avoiding something, then it leads to the risk mitigation. Then risk monitoring is a project tracking activity. Okay, so what is the status of your project development, that you can track, okay, by risk monitoring. Risk management include contingency plan that risk will occur. Okay, so let's understand each issues in a brief. So risk mitigation means avoidance. It is a primary strategy and is achieved through a plan. Okay, for an example, risk of high staff turnover. Okay, so to mitigate this particular risk, you have to strategy for reducing staff turnover. So meet with the current staff to determine causes for turnover. For an example, poor working condition. If any staff will work on a poor condition, then you can also terminate that particular staff. Then low pay and competitive job market. Okay, so there are multiple jobs available in market and your employee is moving to one company to another company. Okay, so that will also lead to the high staff turnover. Then next is a mitigate those causes that are under your control before the project start. Okay, so for an example, you can sign a bond. Okay, by the you can sign a contract to the all the team members, like if this project will complete then and then you can leave the company. Okay, then once the project commences, assume turnover will occur and develop technique to ensure continuity when people leave. Okay, so if any employee still leave the company due to some emergencies, then you have a backup plan. Okay, that you can easily adapt, so your continuation in your software product development is going. Okay, then organize project team so that the information about each development activity is widely dispersed. Okay, so you have to communicate with each team member, then you have to define work product standard and establish mechanism to be sure that all models and documents are developed in a timely manner. Okay, so if I will give you some assignment, then I will also define a deadline for the particular assignment. Okay, so you have to submit this assignment by the end of this week. Okay, so you have to define work product standard and establish mechanism to be sure that all models and documents are developed in a timely manner. Then you have to conduct a peer review of all work. Okay, so that more than one person is up to speed. Okay, so if you are taking review from all the team members, then you can able to analyze which particular person is doing what particular thing and which activity is currently going and which activity is completed. Okay, and also you can able to analyze which person will develop the highest feature. Okay, so then you have to assign a backup staff member for every critical technologist. Okay, so if you have a skilled employee but due to some emergency they left the company, so you have a backup staff member. Okay, so if they are on a leave or they left the institute or any organization, then you have to a backup staff member to continue the particular software product. Okay, so this is the risk mitigation. Okay, so means avoidance, how to avoid the particular risk. Okay, so if there is a risk of high staff turnover, then you can avoid it by a particular scenario. Okay, then next is risk monitoring. Okay, means you are tracking your risk. So during risk monitoring, the project manager monitor factor that may provide an indication of whether a risk is becoming more or less likely. Okay, so if you have defined a general risk, now project manager will identify or monitor that is it a risk is high impact or a low impact. Okay, so the objective of risk monitor is to check whether the predicted risk really occur or not, to ensure the steps defined to avoid the risk are applied properly or not, and to gather the information which can be useful for analyzing the risk. Okay, so if you have already predict some risk, so as a project manager in risk monitoring, you are monitoring that whether the predicted risk is really occur, then you have to ensure about the steps defined to avoid the risk, okay, and apply properly or not. Okay, so if you are avoiding, then is it properly working or not for the particular risk. Okay, and last is to gather the information which can be useful for analyzing the risk. Okay, so these are the objective of risk monitoring. And last is the risk management. Okay, so risk management and contingency planning assume that mitigation effort have failed and that the risk has become a reality. Okay, so now you are not able to avoid the particular risk. Now risk is a reality. Okay, so project manager perform these particular tasks. Okay, so how your risk is managed. So if project manager is successful in applying the project mitigation effectively, then it becomes very much easy to manage the risk. Okay, so if project manager can analyze the risk and it mitigate them. Okay, so if there is a good step follow to mitigate the particular risk, then it is easy to manage the risk. Okay, so if project manager is successful in applying the project mitigation effectively, then it becomes very much easy to manage the risk. Okay, so this is about the risk management. Okay, so we have learned about RMMM, that is risk mitigation, risk monitoring and risk management. Okay, in risk mitigation you are avoiding the particular risk. In risk monitoring, if risk in reality, you are tracking of the particular risk. And risk management, now risk is in reality, so you have to manage that particular risk. So this is about the RMMM. Okay, so RMMM steps incur additional project cost. Okay, so if you are applying this RMMM strategy, then it also leads to the increase of your cost in your software development. Okay, so large project may have identified 30 to 40 risk. Okay, and if it is a very high project, then it also leads to the 100 or 120 risk. Okay, so risk is not limited to the software project itself. Risk can occur after the software has been delivered to the user. Okay, it is not like that, if you are developing any software and you can identify, it might be possible that you are delivering the actual project to the customer and it is working on your side completely, but from user side it may occur any risk. Okay, so risk is not limited to the software project itself. Okay, so it can also occur after the software has been delivered to the users. Okay, so this is about the RMMM. Now what do you mean by risk plan? So RMMM plan is a document. Okay, it is a kind of document in which all the risk analysis activity are described. Sometimes the project manager includes this document as a part of overall project plan, and some software teams do not develop a formal RMMM document. Rather, each risk is documented individually using RIS. Okay, so if a project manager is include this document as a project plan, then it is easy to manage. Okay, but sometimes it might be possible that some software team do not develop a formal RIS. Okay, but they have individually using RIS, that is risk information sheet. Okay, from their side only. Okay, so in most cases RIS is maintained using a database system. Okay, so creation and information entry, priority ordering, searches and other analysis may be accomplished easily, okay, by using this RIS. Okay, so the project manager do not develop the particular document for risk, okay, for at the time of project planning, then a software team can individually using the RIS format. Okay, that is a risk information sheet. Okay, so RIS means they are identifying their own risk, okay, and put it the risk into the RIS. Okay, so what is this RIS? So this is the basic structure of RIS, that is risk information sheet. Okay, here team member can fill all the values like what is the risk ID, then on which date the risk is analyzed, then what is the probability of that particular risk, what is the impact either low or high. Okay, then you have to describe that particular risk. Okay, so description, then what is the refinement step, how to mitigate this, how to manage it, and the current status. Okay, so this is the kind of risk information sheet that is managed by the software team member. Okay, so this is about the risk information sheet. So that's all for the today's lecture. In today's lecture we have discussed about risk projection, then risk refinement, and also we have learned about RMMM, that is risk mitigation, monitoring and management, and we have also discussed about risk plan. Okay, so that's all for the today's lecture. Here we have completed our unit 3 of syllabus. Thank you.